Charles Oliveira is back after beating Beneil Dariush 4 minutes and 10 seconds into the round by KO. A spectacular victory for Charles Oliveira. I couldn't be more excited as a fan of the sport and as a fan of Charles Oliveira. I even made a video on Friday basically saying how important this matchup was for Charles Oliveira, and I still believed it. It was just, sincerely, it was just a complete really huge matchup for Charles Oliveira's career, because honestly, losing one matchup isn't bad, especially to the champion in Islam Makhachev right now, but losing a second fight I think would have done a lot to Charles Oliveira, and I'm so happy that he was able to get this finish and get this win over Beneil Dariush. I do feel really bad for Beneil Dariush, but man, Charles Oliveira, that little area he had as a champion was just amazing. He has incredible fights, and I was super excited that he did win this one. So looking at the fight, some of the takeaways I had, my prediction was Charles Oliveira by KO, and I saw a lot of people saying, not a lot of people, but I saw like some people saying in general that Charles Oliveira, he's going to get clipped and hit to the ground, and then Beneil Dariush is going to submit him and put him in bad positions, which, you know, possibly could be true. I thought for sure in my prediction breakdown, I thought for sure that Charles Oliveira was going to get clipped and brought to the ground. But what I was saying was that I didn't think Beneil Dariush would be able to do enough on the ground to affect Charles Oliveira in that matchup, to like tiring him out or submitting him on the ground. I didn't think it was an Islam Makhachev type offensive grappling that Beneil Dariush had. Like, for example, Islam Makhachev, a really big, heavy dude who has a very heavy sambo background, wrestles all the time. I knew, or not that I at least knew, but just based on that, compared to Beneil Dariush, Islam was able to use his weight and kind of force a submission when he was able to knock down Charles Oliveira. At the beginning of this matchup, who would have known if Charles Oliveira would have gotten that takedown at the beginning, because he did say he was trying to go for a trip? Who would have known if Charles Oliveira would have gotten that takedown? Because at the beginning of the matchup, Charles Oliveira looks for a takedown, ends up on his back, but does really good off his back, defensive grappling. He's able to defend off Beneil Dariush, stay in his guard, went for a couple heel hooks, or I think he went for a heel hook, ended up pushing Beneil Dariush off of him and then getting into the clinch. And the clinch for Charles Oliveira is a very dangerous area. Uses a lot of knees to the body, which I thought was a pretty good idea against a guy like Beneil Dariush, who does have a softer midsection. And he was just able to close out the fight, was able to pressure him, which I did say in my video, that if and when Charles Oliveira pressured, I think in a scrap he would look a lot better and he would be able to catch Beneil Dariush. And I think that's exactly what happened. I think Beneil Dariush, although has a lot of power in his hands and does have underrated striking, he is very sloppy at times. And I think if, or at least what I said in the video, was that if Charles Oliveira forced him to strike and forced him to scrap, he'd get really sloppy and Charles Oliveira would be able to catch him with some stuff. And I'm happy, I guess, not necessarily recently, but off the top of my head, I hadn't seen Charles Oliveira throw too many head kicks in general, and he has a couple of head kicks that got a lot of attention out of Beneil Dariush. Early on in that round, he got a lot of attention out of Beneil Dariush, and I think Dariush went for a clinch early in that round, and he hit him with the head kick again, which pretty much started the ending sequence here for Charles Oliveira. Hurt Beneil Dariush, was able to land, I think, he didn't land the right hand, but I think it was a left hook that caught the chin of Beneil Dariush, and Beneil Dariush went to the ground and shot for a single leg. Charles Oliveira was able to scramble out of it off his back and then basically get on top of Beneil Dariush and ground and pound him pretty much at least close to unconsciousness. Beneil Dariush was still there, but as he was beating him up, you could definitely see him like start to go a little bit more. He was getting beaten pretty badly. A fantastic win for Charles Oliveira in this matchup. And then it does seem like we are going to get him versus Islam in the second fight. That's what it sounds like. Dana White said after in his press conference that he's very excited about the second match of Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev, or he's excited about the prospect of that match. And just thinking about it, we know the number one contender fight between Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, and Charles Oliveira has beaten both of them. Obviously, they haven't lost to Islam Makhachev, which, take it or leave it, whatever you want to put that as, but right now, Charles Oliveira is that guy. He has a lot of hype behind him right now. He got the hype back around him. He lost after Islam Makhachev, and he just got it back. Very impressive performance. Can't say that enough. It would be very interesting to see what happens between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje for this number one contenders match in July. We'll see what happens, how much damage is taken in general, because Islam Makhachev, I'm pretty sure, is confirmed at this point for October. We know a couple guys that are confirmed. Islam Makhachev, Khamzat Chimaev are on that card, and I believe, what is that, July, so that's 7 all the way to October. That's like a 3 month a 3-month turnaround. So there's a lot of damage being taken from either one of those guys, which I pretty much predict at that point. It's Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier. They'll definitely go after it for the BMF title. They got to do something, right? But I think Charles Oliveira is definitely one of those guys that are going to be for real in that contention there. I think he does get the title shot over both of those guys. I think they both take a lot of damage, and I think it would just be better for them in general just not to take the fight on such short notice against a guy like Islam Makhachev, where you're not going to be able to train your wrestling and grappling, especially if both of them, they're not expecting each other to wrestle and grapple in that matchup. So I think it'd be better for all parties that Charles Oliveira gets the second fight. There's no real contender other than that number one contender matchup between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. So I like the matchup. Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev too. A lot of hype around Charles Oliveira again. Charles Oliveira seemed like one of those guys where it felt like he was going to go on a very long losing streak. After that loss to Islam Makhachev, you're like, man, we know about Charles Oliveira's history, quitting in fights, getting dejected in fights in general, just around the sport. He's one of those guys where you kind of get worried that he's going to go on a really long losing streak, and it's just going to be painful to see. And Beneil Dariush was on such a long win streak, was beating the likes of Gamrot relatively easily, while Arman Tsarukyan was, I don't want to say skating by. I thought Arman Tsarukyan beat him for sure, but he made it close with Mateus Gamrot, and Beneil Dariush looked really good against Mateus Gamrot. So Beneil Dariush was that guy, and he just knocked him out cold. So or I guess not out cold, but he knocked him out, the number one guy in that division. So we'll see what happens here. I hope the second fight between Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira does happen. I don't know if you can really make a Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, either one of those guys coming off like a 3-month break there to take on Islam Makhachev within 3 months. So we'll see what happens there. It sounds like Dana White likes the idea of it, so why not make it happen? Let me know who you guys have in the second fight down below and what you guys think of that possible matchup, and I'll see you guys next time.